only on the golf course, as you know, every pro shop you will find the best of Peter Millar, but it's everything else that you need in your life. They've been refining luxury and performance for 25 years. Joining me now, he knows because he's wearing it right now, and he's on the golf course at Riviera. He is the Chief Championships Officer for the United States Golf Association, and most importantly, a two-time Alaska State Open champion as well. That is John Bodenhamer. How are you, my friend?
I'm great, Gary. How could I be any better? I'm at one of the cathedrals of the game here at Riviera Country Club, getting ready for what is going to be a great and memorable U.S. Women's Open.
It is the 81st edition. And John, look, if anybody looks at not only where the women have played the U.S. Women's Open recently, but if they look at the next 10 years and you said you can construct the greatest trip of your life, what 10 places would you go to? Most, if not all of them, would be the U.S. Women's Open Rota. But let me ask you about Riviera. Why was it so important for the USGA to bring that great championship to that place for the first time?
Well, it's one of those places, Gary, that it's revered by the players, the men players. Over the years, you know, going back to 100 years ago, the Los Angeles Open, and then, of course, Ben Hogan won the U.S. Open in 1948. There's this long list of great men's players that have played and won here, and it is among the finest architecture in our country, George C. Thomas Jr. and that fame. But I think really our identity, our mission is to really take the women in the U.S. Women's Open, excuse me, all of our women's championships to America's greatest venues. And Riviera is certainly one of those, and give the women a chance to win on these great venues where the men have won over the years. So we're really proud that we're here with the U.S. Women's Open. It's going to be a great celebration of the women's game and to follow in the footsteps of Ben Hogan and all those great winners. You know, when a player is asked, where did you win your U.S. Open? And they're able to say Riviera Country Club, it just means more.
You know, I've talked to people, and a lot of them are elite players, and some who have that curiosity about design. And as somebody who was a really good amateur player, you were on a national championship team at BYU. You played in some U.S. amateurs. Did you have your own eureka moment as a young man playing elite competitions outside of where you grew up, and your curiosity, whether it be about design principles or architecture? Did you have one of those moments yourself?
I did. It was when I was in college at BYU, and I was the type of player. I was more of a finesse player. I was kind of average length off the tee, and so I really had to manage my game, and I was a tactician around the golf course, and I had some pretty good success as an amateur, but it was always fascinating to me how to dissect a golf course. It always kind of intrigued me that most guys really didn't think about it. And you go into some of that today, and you really talk to some of the guys and the gals, and you really find out who really pays attention to what the architect intended. And we seek those players out, and their opinions are really important to us. We're intentional about that. But I think it's something I've always been intrigued by. You know, when I came to the USGA a little over 15 years ago, I had the opportunity to work with Mike Davis, who had the same sort of thinking, and just being around players and just how they approach the golf course, what the architects intended. You know, Gary, I think we really are on a journey here with the USGA, and when we come into these great venues, we really want to make sure we're mindful of what the architect intended for them and how they're played. And we really, while we'll grow a little rough, have a few more difficult hole locations, but we really try to stay with the intent of the architect.
The intent of George Thomas and people who watch the event at Riviera, like you said, on the men's side annually, there is a familiarity with a lot of the holes. For you personally, in terms of the setup of this championship, what are I don't even want to call them, challenges, opportunities to be able to amplify so many of the elements of that great golf course upon the setup of this championship?
He starts you out easy. He lulls you to sleep with an easy downhill par 5, and then he punches you in the nose with a really tough, long uphill into the wind par 4. He does that in every one of his golf courses. It was a trait of his. But you look at Thomas, and I think this place, almost more than any of his other venues, risk-reward comes into play. Ben Hogan called the 4th hole the greatest par 3 in golf, and you look today, there's a little bit of a redesign to it, and but we're excited about it. I think the Redan feature on the right side, playing into the green, playing on the ground, you can take it dead aim right at it, or you can play it along the ground a little bit if it's firm and fast and into the wind. And then you go to what I think is maybe the finest short par 4 in the game, number 10. You know, you've got options and choices about how you want to play that in trying to lay up off the tee or take it onto the green or around it. And boy, it's devilish for a little over 300 yard par 4. It gives players fits, and I think for the women to be able to experience that is going to be fantastic. And then you get into some of the other holes that are out here. A lot of it will be hole location work, or we'll use some of the hole locations that the players really have to think about moving their ball left to right or right to left. It really is a place where you have to drive in the fairway. You don't want to be playing out of this Kikuyu rough. It just won't be a recipe for success. You got to be in the fairway to hit your approach shot into these small, tiny greens. I'm
curious, John, is there anything from the U.S. Amateur, which was held there in 2017, whether it be pin locations, data points, that can be applicable to this championship? I understand the style of play. These are young men blessed with enormous speed and power. Are there things that are transferable to that setup to this week?
100%. And we gathered all the data that we could. Shannon Roulard, our championship director, she'll lead the golf course setup efforts. And she was at Genesis this past year and in the past. We look at all that data from when the men play in February. You know, it's different though, Gary. That's February. We're playing in June. Kikuyu's a little bit different. It's a little bit bouncier in February. It's a little spongier this time. We worked really hard with Marshall Dick, the superintendent, and the club to really get things dialed in on the putting greens, and the weather looks like it's going to cooperate this week, so hoping for firm and fast, bouncy conditions. But we gathered all that data from Genesis as best we could. We have a Hall of Famer that claims Riviera as her home club, Amy Alcott, UN champion in the past. We picked her brain a whole lot, and we did. We had the U.S. Amateur here in 2017 when Doc Redmond defeated Doug Gim in a classic final match, and we're using all that data too. And it did play firm and fast that week. I would say too, Gary, as we think about the women's game, it's very similar to the men's game in a lot of ways. We'll just play Riviera a little bit shorter, but it'll be firm and fast if we can get things that way, which we believe we will with the weather. But the hole locations will be very similar, the fairway lines, all of that. It's just a tiny bit shorter because we really do want to showcase the greatness of the women's game.
You mentioned a tiny bit shorter. You know, a lot of people, they go, well, okay, it's whatever yardage it is comparatively to the men. As far as the design of that golf course, is there anything that is compromised in any way in terms of the way that golf course plays if a hole is 30, 40, 50 yards shorter, particularly when it comes to angles, interior movement of the hole, those types of things that might be more nuanced, but they're very critical to these elite players?
No, I really don't think so. I think we've got a lot of opportunity to move things around here. You know, there are new teeing areas that give us great variety on a hole like number 4. The club has been really good about creating that for us and giving us some yardages where we can move it around a lot. And as you know, it all depends on the weather. It looks like the prevailing wind out of the southwest is going to be with us all of this coming week. So we're starting to dial in our plan. But no, I don't think so. I think it'll be, again, similar angles, similar clubs for approach shots that the men will use in the Genesis, have used in the past, did use in the U.S. Amateur. Again, we can do that because we'll move the teeing areas around and maybe a little bit up in some areas for the women. But what the men hit into 4, what they hit into 16, the short par 3 on the back, or number 6, a great little par 3 with the bunker in the middle of the green. Think about that, a bunker in the middle of the green. Talk about innovative architecture. And the risk reward with all of that, and you know, that's intentional on our part. We want the women to experience what the men have experienced. So we're going to be providing similar very similar shot values to them.
You mentioned number one. It is a gentle handshake, but it's also an iconic image of people teeing off literally right there. Will the women use that same teeing ground?
They will. We were intentional about that. That was important to us, in the foreground of this magnificent clubhouse, and that you see from around the golf course. That's part of the character here. The clubhouse sitting on top of the hill. Again, that's just another part of the experience we wanted them to experience here at Riviera Country Club. Again, a lot of similarities. Really, the difference, I think, mostly, Gary, is the Genesis has played in February,
yes.
The PGA Tour, and the women will play in June. And in 2031, 5 years from now, we'll have a U.S. Open here, and so we're paying very close attention. And a lot of people ask us, why do you go so far out with your championships? Well, this is one example as to why. What we do here at the U.S. Women's Open will really inform a lot of what we do for the U.S. Open. What I mean by that, certainly hole location work, but with the weather cooperating this week, the firmness of the putting greens, the green speeds, we'll be in the 13-foot range here. We're already there. We're trying to manage them now along with the firmness and just firm up at the right time. But we're learning a lot. It's our first U.S. Women's Open here at Riviera, and it'll be our second U.S. Open. It goes all the way back to 1948, and we don't have much data when Hogan won, so we're kind of creating it, and every little bit helps. I will say another thing that's important here to us that this year was really important at Riviera is that it is their 100th birthday this year. On October 11th, they'll celebrate it. The club opened 100 years ago, and this championship is part of that great celebration. And I might mention, too, this year at Riviera is really the start of the future sites that we really have gone out well into the future with. When we went to Riviera and said, would you like to lead us off into what is going to be a great lineup of U.S. Women's Open sites, they raised their hand quickly. Megan Watanabe, Jim Richardson here at the club, and it was really a joy to work with them.
I know, John, it's also not lost on you that Babe Zaharias went through a 36-hole qualifier in 1945 to play in the LA Open, which is a very significant thing historically, not just in women's golf, but in all of golf. Last thing, John, the investment that these companies are making, and you have a great presenting sponsor with Ally, in terms of giving not only the platform and the venues, but also the representative purses. Why is that so important? Yourselves, the RNA, and all these other organizations that have really increased what these women are playing for. Why is that important beyond just what they earn?
We think it's all of us at the USA feel it's our obligation to lift up the women's game. You think about our history at the USGA, and you go back to 1894, and Gary, you're my favorite show, Five Clubs, honoring the five clubs, the founding clubs of the USGA. You and I talk about that all the time, and it's so cool that you do it. But it is true from day one. We had the U.S. Amateur at Newport, and as an afterthought, the next day was the U.S. Open. But you know what we played a few weeks later? The U.S. Women's Amateur. The USGA has been about the game, men and women, professional and amateur, from day one, and we're proud of that. And the U.S. Women's Open is the oldest professional major. And I think for us, it's a bigger obligation. We think for the future of the game. This championship is going to inspire millions of little girls and little boys to want to reach and be Nelly Korda or Allison Corpuz or pick your great player, Michelle Wie. That's what we do. It's inspiration, and the purse is part of that. The women deserve that, and we were proud to take the lead in elevating our purse to the level that we did a couple of years ago, and we're going to continue to lead in ways. Venues is part of it. Purse is another part. And really what we're doing with all of that and the venues is we're on a journey with the U.S. Women's Open, our lineup, and we think by going to the great venues, that's our identity. We think more fans will come out and want to be a part of that. They'll watch these great players on the world's greatest, America's greatest venues. Our partners will activate more, which will be better for these players and the fans. and more viewers will watch because they want to see these great venues and the women excel on these great venues. So it's a long-term journey to really grow the U.S. Women's Open, and we're excited to be on that journey starting at Riviera.
Well, I mean, it is as special as it gets to be at Riviera, to have those women get to play that iconic golf course, to win the U.S. Women's Open. It's always a pleasure. I always value the time. You know that. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Gary, you're my favorite show, and love being with you. You understand the game like no one else, and thank you for having me.
That is John Bodenhamer, Chief Championships Officer for the United States Golf Association. What a spot. Riviera for the U.S. Women's Open.